Hi, welcome to JCrimiTalk. We have got Nosheen, Hema, and Laura on the panel today. We're basically going to talk about the article that was in the Telegraph on August the 14th. The headline is Child Rapist Posed as Policeman to Attack 3 Girls in 1 hour, just 6 months after being released from jail. Quite a lengthy and catchy headline. So we're not talking about smuggling or drugs or anything this week. Bit of a deep topic, I think, and a touchy topic. So yeah, I assume everyone's read the article.
Yeah.
What do you think, guys?
Obviously, really, really shocking crime, and very shocking subject. And I think that there's a perception that sex offenders will be really carefully monitored once released.
Yeah.
And that they're not the kind of prisoners to be given the benefit of the doubt. And I think headlines like this make people question whether or not that's the case.
Yeah, because
especially because he committed a crime within 6 months, didn't he, of being released. So my question is, why wasn't he monitored? Like, he was in prison for 9 years for raping a 9-year-old or
11.
9-year-old, wasn't he? But then he was let out for 2 years. But there was no monitoring.
Yeah, he was literally able to roam through to do what he wanted. Literally, he did actually do what he wanted.
And at one point, he went up to some girls as well, and he was told that, he can't approach kids, but yet he did.
He still did. I don't know if it's down to the whether it's the monitoring. I do know monitoring is a problem because when he come out, they should have been checking up on him frequently, seeing what he was doing. But I do think he had a problem as well. So even if he was getting monitored, I still believe he would have still probably found a way to attempt to commit these offences against these young children or somehow, because he's made it, reading the article, he's made it clear that that's all he wants to do. It's a bit sick if you ask me.
It takes years of therapy to even get somebody to start changing their mind about their predilections. And unless you've been to a specific place like Brendan, there's no way he will have actually had a really good look at himself and what his problems were. So it would be 9 years with virtually no rehabilitation.
I agree.
It's not the kind of crime where somebody might think, "Oh, I'll not do that again." It is built in them, isn't it?
It's become him.
In terms of monitoring, I mean, how far do we monitor somebody? Because if you've got somebody that's extremely manipulative and feels that they have a right to do it, these are the kind of people they're attracted to. It's just another form of attraction. All the techniques of neutralisation that they use to convince themselves that what they're doing is fine. And they present very well, and they're very smartly dressed, and they're very articulate, and they go and see their probation officer, and they say, "Oh, it's really good. I've met this nice woman, this, that, and the other," and they construct a whole web of lies. How do we check up on that without actually going against our principles as a country? In overusing surveillance, you're not going to have a police officer tracking them 24/7.
It's a bit unethical. And a bit unfair if that was the case. But I don't know.
But generally, monitoring anybody is hard, especially with all the cuts and everything happening now. That you can't. There's so many criminals out there. You can't specifically monitor each one.
That in that case, then, do you think? I know it's difficult to monitor everybody in general, but do you then think, because of crimes like this and offences and people that are going around and doing such things as these, do you believe that more attention should be focused on them? So maybe the resources, the little resources we have as a country, should be focused more on people that are perpetrating and doing such things as these. Do you think that's...
I kind of agree with what Hannah said before, which is that rather than monitoring people once they're released, while we've got them incarcerated, make sure they actually genuinely address their issues. Now, there are some people who are going to be hostile to therapy, going to refuse to engage with it, and those people are going to probably end up having to serve longer, because you can't let a paedophile back out onto the streets if he's saying, "Hey, there's nothing wrong with what I did," or, "I refuse to engage with this, it's beneath me," whatever. But I think that's where resources would be better directed.
There's 250,000 known paedophiles in this country. Well, I've got convictions, let alone the ones that haven't been caught or reported or terrified their victims that will never ever report them. And then there's 250,000 police officers, which is going down year on year on year.
We're a show at the moment, it's 1 to 1.
part of me thinks, well, you can't just put your resources in one area. But then again, a few years down the line, those children that have been abused will actually go on to commit crimes themselves or become problematic parents. Maybe not all of them, obviously. But do you sort their problem out now before it becomes something bigger?
Yeah, I would think.
And has society got the patience for that? Has government's got the patience for that? 5 years.
How we deal with paedophilia as a nation, I think, is really interesting, and it really says a lot about our values. Because let's look at, I know it's a very specific opportunity case, but if you look at the Jimmy Savile case, what we've done is we've allowed someone for decades to get away with raping and abusing the most vulnerable people in our society. And what do we do when it turns out that when that truth actually comes to light? We throw money at it. We say, okay, you were raped 5 times, here's 10 grand, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We quantify it with money. So instead of providing these people with genuine therapy and with, you know, a way to move on with their lives and to re-empower them and to make sure that we call them survivors and not victims, we're throwing money at the situation because that's how we value things. And I think the way that we treat the issue of paedophilia, you know, the moral panic that suddenly everyone's a paedophile and then one false allegation comes to light, well, okay, then everyone's lying.
Yeah.
And, you know, and as I say, you know, using money to treat psychological and physical problems, I think it tells us what a long way to go we've got.
Kind of means to just say, oh, here's the money, that's it, stay silent. You know,
It's over now, it's easy to solve.
It's done. It was, and also with cases like such as Jimmy Savile, where the women were abused as children, and they've only now, you know, come out with it. Okay, not only now, but within the recent years, they've only just come out with it. They've had to live with that for their entire life. So obviously, like you said, the issues that, you know, they've had, the psychological deficits, you know, the issues they've had with bonding with people, that we will never understand. Okay, I hope we will never understand. Obviously, when they're getting money thrown at them, I don't think the money's in. Money can't justify. Do you know what I mean? Money can't justify what's happened. It can never. You can. The reparations for that will never be enough. So I do believe that there needs to be more organisations.
But look at this,
charities,
like, you know, especially the money thing. You can't give money to these children in this case.
But
Because, you know,
these ones.
you get what I mean? Because think about it, they were raped by police officers. The man was dressed as a police officer, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So to them, a police officer is someone who is out there to protect you. But in their mind, for the rest of their lives, they'll have that image that it was a police officer. They will live in a fear of police officers, and they need help at the moment. Money's not going to help them. It's therapy. We need to pay attention to these kind of kids, because when they grow up, they're going to live their life in fear of, like, police officers in this case, because he dressed up as a policeman and raped her. Someone who's out there, that image is going to be in their mind forever, that it was a police officer. Regardless of whether he was fake or real, he was a police officer to them in that uniform. That uniform is going to scare them.
And he easily faked to them that he was a police officer.
Yeah,
especially they will question their own judgment, won't they?
Yeah. And I think one of the interesting, obviously we're all like absolutely disgusted when we read the headline. I mean, in one way that's really healthy, because obviously we all revile people who would do something so terrible if people are so vulnerable. But on the other hand, our reaction, the reaction of most normal people, is kind of problematic, because one of the best ways of resolving the issue and the crisis we have with paedophilia in this country is to get rid of the taboo, so that children feel that they won't be looked at with shock and disgust when they're disclosed, because they are. And it's all very well, oh no, we're disgusted with a crime, not with you. That's not how a child feels when, you know, when people go, really? Oh God, your uncle did that to you. That's not how they feel when we do that. So in one way, what we need to be saying to survivors is, instead of saying, oh, your life's been blighted forever, how could this person do something to you, is say, do you know what, you came across a person who was absolutely disgusting and revolting, and what they tried to do to you is terrible, but do you know what, you can move on in this way and this way and this way, and this is how we'll help you. And that's the attitude we need to take, rather than paying people back for, you know, even on the BBC you've got people talking about, you know, sort of stolen lives and lost decades of people's lives. It needs to be so that, your life might not be exactly the same again, but it can still be brilliant, and here's how you can overcome it. And that needs to be, I think, our focus as a society.
We need to get
and it's not good enough to say.
Theresa May needs to do some intervening in this.
And it's not good enough to say that money's there for you to get therapy, because that's
I
should
think
be free anyway.
I feel like it's them saying, oh, here's the money, but you have to do this, conditioned money kind of thing. And if someone was to have got the money, I still think it's terrible that they're getting kind of paid off to show up.
And they're told to be traumatised as well. I mean, I remember reading, it's just anecdotal obviously, but I remember reading in, I think it was Take a Break magazine or something about 10 years ago, way before, yeah, I know, look on your face, Take a Break, you're like, I know, but, okay, I borrowed it off someone, what can you say? I promise it wasn't mine. But somebody had written in, and obviously it's before we had the attitude that we have now of complete panic, and before Jimmy Savile's scandal had broken. And it was this woman who said he was freaking out.
Unfortunately, we had a bit of a technical difficulty, so back to Laura, continue.
Yes, so basically this woman had been told that she needed to feel traumatised. Now the advice given to her by the agony aunt at the time was that no, you shouldn't feel any guilt, but at the same time, if you think about it, your reaction isn't as a result of trauma, it's as a result of what society's told you about. Obviously it's a very unusual case because it's two children playing and one of them playing in a very inappropriate way, rather than a grown man or even someone over, say, the age of 10, which obviously is the age of criminal responsibility, taking advantage of a child. But I think that it is an example of how sometimes what society tells you, and when society tells you that you must be traumatised by this, you feel like you're not a proper victim, and you must be somehow complicit if you're not. And what we should actually be telling people is that everyone is different. So if you've been raped, whether you're an adult or a child, and you can move on within a relatively short period of time, that is fantastic for you, but you can't expect that to happen. That's the case for everyone else. It's unusual, but it does happen. Some women stay with their husbands when they're raped.
Don't you think it's easy for society to build this picture up and say, oh, you should feel like this, you must feel like that? Because, okay, let's be real. All the people that are making these decisions, they've not probably, I can't say they have, but more than likely they haven't been through the situation. So it's hard for them to say, oh, it's okay that you don't feel this way. It's okay that you don't feel this way, and that way, we can get you through it. We're going to help you. But I think they're just putting a label and tarnishing everyone with the same brush and assuming that everybody should then react the same way or feel the same way about such a thing. Because, like you said, the girl, she didn't even realise until she heard the true definition of what child sexual abuse is. So yeah.
And it's disempowering. It's very disempowering to be told twice. To be told either to be told what to do or to be, physically overpowered. For the first time is awful, and then you have to relive it over and over again when people tell you how you should and shouldn't feel.
The next question I had to ask, we've got pretty much ran through all the others. Do you believe that child sexual abuse can be justified? And I'm just saying that. Consider criminological theories and stuff like that. We all have our own. We all we know the decision, what we think. But consider with like criminological or psychological or theories and aspects. Do you actually believe it can be justified? Because no matter how many theories I've read and stuff, I've managed to understand things and get a better insight into why they do it and how they can be treated and stuff like that. But I personally believe that it shouldn't be justified, and it can't be. But what do you think?
Well, what do we mean with, first of all, have to kind of categorise what we mean by paedophilia, because the tabloid press means by paedophilia means anybody under the age of 16. In America, they mean anybody under the age of 18. So what we've been talking about quite often, when probably we're sort of thinking in our heads, is we're thinking of, say, someone who might have raped a 12-year-old, someone who might have raped a 13-year-old. Technically speaking, these people aren't paedophiles, these aren't prepubescent children, they're in a stage of early pubescence. So it's a different paraphilia. But in terms of things that explain the behaviour, I think that there are a multitude of different reasons behind people's offending behaviour. I think sometimes people are just sexually attracted to children, and in those cases I think people can go for chemical castration, because I think a lot of these people, to be fair to them, don't want these desires. They do know they're deviant, they do know that they're gross. Not all of them offend, but the ones that do, their desire and their selfishness supersedes the fact they know that child has the right not to be raped. I think others are very, very mature, and perhaps with therapy they can stop wanting to engage in relationships with people that never ever answer back and will just look at them, as if adoringly, because we don't want to talk about it, but grooming is so powerful that sometimes you become, you as an offender become the centre of that child's world, and that's quite a powerful thing for someone who's got very low self-esteem. But I think the most dangerous category of paedophiles is those that are very sadistic And quite frankly, you could chemically castrate that person, you could physically castrate them, they'd find a way to abuse someone. And a good example is, say, somebody like Ian Brady, who we think of him as a paedophilic offender. Actually, 2 people that he killed and sexually assaulted were over the age of consent. The reason why he started targeting children was because when he targeted Pauline Reed, who was in her late adolescence, she was too much work for him. So he needed to go for someone who was younger and wouldn't put up so much of a fight. And so I think quite often with sadistic paedophiles, they're not even necessarily drawn to children, they're just cowardly. And which is why some offenders will attack children and the elderly. So I think there, in terms of whether anything can be justified, I think you can have some sympathy for a person that is clinically a paedophile and does everything in their power, i.e. does not offend, to stop offending. But I don't think you can ever have full empathy or sympathy with someone who chooses to offend. If someone is a paedophile, they should seek help, they should seek counselling, and if they're not a sadistic paedophile, then in theory counselling should be able to help them.
Yeah.
I agree with what Laura said.
It's a crime against a child. You shouldn't have to justify it. It should never be justified. But their children are innocent.
Before you continue on that point, like, yeah, sorry for the cameras down. But it's a crime against a child, we understand that, but we have to remember, I know that we're in a modern day society, but we have to remember childhood is a construct. It's never, the childhood hasn't always existed. So I understand that it is a crime against a child, but once upon a time, things like this were happening. Sexual abuse against people under certain ages was occurring. So I'm not saying people have that mindset now, but there are people that probably believe that, they're just a human, they're not a child. Do you know what I mean? So,
the age of consent went up from 13 in Victorian times to 16, where it is now.
Yeah.
But laws shift all the time, and we accommodate ourselves to shift with the law. So,
And a man who is attracted, or a woman, because there are female paedophiles, no, we haven't got time to go into it, but obviously there are, who is attracted to a 13-year-old is not technically a paedophile anyway, if they're not attracted to prepubescent children. It's the very early or prepubescent. So
I think it's all the everything in writing that makes it so complex to determine what exactly is a paedophile or a child sex abuser, to determine whether it can be justified or not. So fine lines and blurred lines and stuff like that, which I think is a problem. Did you? I couldn't even.
No, it's alright.
but you can choose to ignore the age of consent or not, and that's a decision you make yourself.
Yeah.
And it's a law. For example, it's illegal to drink and drive. It's illegal to take drugs and drive. You make that choice. And it's an informed choice mostly by most people. People know about paedophilia. If you choose to break the law, then there are consequences, and that's the way it is, unfortunately.
Does anyone have anything to add?
no, I think we've covered that topic.
Right, that's us done for this episode. You can like and subscribe and follow us on Twitter, Facebook. Done. Thank you guys.